got with me Barbara Parker, CEO of Meditation for Business, and I'm going to have a hash global leadership conversation one with her. As we all know, it's two specific questions to get the conversation going. We've got a global leadership crisis with pockets of excellence, thank goodness, but we have to start with a conversation. And we're starting with number one, two specific questions. Barbara certainly would have strong views on these two specific questions that I'm going to pose to her. Barbara, welcome.
Thank you very much, Arian, for this opportunity. It's great, and I think the subject matter is, like you said, very important. So great. If you'd like to start with the first question, that'll be wonderful.
All right. In essence, what is the most important quality or attribute we need to develop, awaken, or improve in leaders if we are going to turn around the current leadership crisis?
From my position, and as years as an executive, so I'm biased in that area. For me, leaders, it's absolutely essential for them to be able to have resilience to stress. They need to be coming from a calm, focused place in order to lead effectively. So for me, that's the core. Without that, nothing else happens. Leaders that are filled with stress, neurologically, we know there's a plethora of information out there at the moment with regards to the neurological impact of stress and the way it reduces leadership capacity. So the first port of call is for leaders to have the mental capacity to function as leaders. Yes, in a nutshell, that would be my answer. Would you like me to expand?
Well, obviously you could choose one of 100 things on the top of your list. And the one you're choosing, let me see if I understand it, it's the capacity to have mental resilience under stress, to keep your thinking capacity optimal. We know what happens to the brain cells, everything, your whole thing. I read an article this morning, funny enough, about what happens to the brain when you're under stress, typically. So you're saying leaders must have the ability to remain calm and in control so that they can continue thinking optimally under stress. And we have more stress and more challenging environment than ever before in the history of the world, potentially, with more information and more decision making and more visibility and more of everything. So why do you choose this as the number one or the top quality or attribute that we need to awaken or develop in leaders, as opposed to many others you could choose?
I think just from an experience point of view, first of all, you expressed that wonderfully. Obviously, there's no magic bullet. It's a series of events that need to lead to an effective and optimum leader. But there are certain foundational things that need to be in place to allow other things to begin to work. So the first thing is, if the person is not mentally in the right place, nothing is going to happen. And I think with the advent of all the neurological data, it begins to explain a lot of leaders' behaviors. We now understand that you can be hardwired to move away from your higher order functioning and reasoning. You can become reactive, poor decision-making, lack of clarity or creativity, inability to moderate our social behavior. And the price that we pay in activating these sort of more reptilian parts of our brain, which we have no capacity to stop that. If we are not resilient, stress will force us into that space, into our reptilian space, our reptilian brain. And the price is that we shut down our higher order functioning, our prefrontal cortex deliverables, which include the ability to think clearly, to be able to be creative, etc. So the shift between these two neurological platforms, the mammalian brain and the reptilian brain, is a very exciting challenge for us in business. I mean, who would have thought we would be sitting here having discussions that neurologists had 20 years ago? But we have access to this data, and it begins to explain a lot. And I think when you look under the hood, what it takes away from leaders is the ability to just pretend. Stress manifests very visibly. You know that wonderful saying, fake it until you make it? No, it doesn't happen when you're stressed. You manifest all the things that you can tick it off and you can say this person is stressed. And I think this has been embraced by most leaders where they're accountable, directly accountable for profitability and productivity. Because that's the area that, as business people, those are the areas we're concerned about first. As individual professionals or individual leaders, obviously they are concerned about their careers. In the past, this element of their behavior was not seen as necessarily as important. But when one can directly link the reduction of productivity, the reduction of profitability to the way leaders lead or their lack of leadership, then the spotlight does fall on them and is beginning to fall on them. And that's why so many leaders have begun to embrace it. We're not the pioneers. The pioneers were in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and there's a lot of incredible leaders who took this on. We're the settlers. We're the leaders. We were, in actual fact, as an investment in the future to future-proof productivity, profits, and our careers, we need to invest in this particular skill set. And I don't think that there is any leader today who will question it, the legitimacy of that. I think there are many that don't know how to. The question is the big how to. So for me, just through personal experience, I was part of the IT industry many years ago when we moved through the big shift from the into the 2000 when there was a big scare. IT became from where stress was a great thing. If you were stressed, you were there, you had made it. To suddenly stress being something where it was anxiety, it was depression, etc. So I, as a leader, had to do something. I was the key decision maker, and anything I did in the way that I behaved would manifest in my peers, in my staff, etc. So I had to keep it together. I must admit, when I came on board and I saw the word meditation, the connotation and the link between meditation and religion was still quite fast. It was only when I went into it where I began to realize it had been uncoupled very many years ago. And the core resilient skill set that is offered by this was there. And I personally embraced it. But it was a personal journey. It was very individual. But about 14 years ago, a lot of my peers began to come to me, and we began to have workshops. We began to sort of run resilience programs. But more because it was a necessity, it was a business necessity. We began to take on board those people and those leaders that were obviously just not coping. They were just not making the right kind of decisions. There was decision fatigue, we know now, etc. But about 3 years ago, it was alarming the degree to which stress had manifested itself from top to bottom, literally from boardroom to backroom. If you had a broom in your hand or a pen, it didn't really matter. Stress was throughout. And as you alluded to earlier, it knows no age, it knows no gender, it has no boundaries. The uniqueness of stress today is very much the thing that makes us such an advanced society, is things like the internet, but its data consumption is one of the key contributors to stress. And it's not going to stop. Business can't stop data consumption. In fact, we're designing technology in such a way that you can consume more data. That means more stress. So anybody that is forward-looking needs to understand that this is a newly acquired skill. In the same way, 20 years ago, the only people who typed were PAs or secretaries. Today, everybody types, a prerequisite for employment. In the same way, resilience to not only stress, but the ability to build up the resilience, to actually be able to release hormones that build up the motivation, the ability to function in a higher space. That's going to become even more as human beings are beginning to compete with computers. So it's not just that you have to manage your stress. You have to function optimally to be able to justify your existence in business. And this lands slap bang on the lap of leaders in both accounts. One, they are decision makers for business. If their heads are not in the right place, they're not going to be making the right decisions. So if anybody who's employing a leader who is not optimal and is under stress is running the risk of affecting their business. The second thing, the leader embraces it from their own career point of view. Because if they, in actual fact, are not taking on board one of the core skill sets for the future, they're going to be left behind. It's as simple as that, because this is not something, it's not a tablet that you can take and, whoops, I'm a lagger, but I'm going to pop the tablet and I'm going to walk into the next meeting. You have to invest and build the muscle like an athlete. and you are either just the local athlete who walks around the block, or you're the athlete that is competing sort of at a municipal level or a national level or an Olympic level. It depends. As a leader and as a professional in business today, the investment in your ability to manage stress will have a direct correlation to your ability to be able to function in business. Slowly, what we're observing is people are becoming functionally unemployable. Some organizations I've noticed in the UK and in America, I'm not too sure the legitimacy of it, but they're beginning to have codicils on their contracts where they're saying, can you manage stress and are you on any stress medication? Because although there is a place for medication, absolutely, and nobody is questioning that, it's a blocker, and there is question and articles and research as to whether or not people who are on medication can function at the levels of optimization that people have to in the future. So although medication is there, it has to be balanced and counterbalanced by a resilience that is internal. So yes, that is when I say this is a foundation on which everything is based. I think that your mind is the very thing that allows you to deliver on anything else. Hence me putting that in first place.
Okay, and you've said a lot of interesting things about developing that, which is the second question, is how to best develop or awaken or improve this quality or attribute. And meditation would play a big role, mindfulness, the ability to be present, all those sort of things. So I hear you saying a lot of things. We will have more conversations in the future, but you're putting it out there as part of the need for leaders in order to cope in today's world. We have a crisis. The need to perform optimally is higher than ever before, and the pressure and the stress is more than ever before.
Yes.
So if you don't find a way to bring those two together, manage the stress and function optimally, you've got a problem. And if you're not going to proactively work on it, the world is not going to offer it to you on a plate. It's not going to be easy. So you have to develop that skill. I buy into it. There's lots of other things we could talk about. What about the competition with emotion? So you're putting a lot of emphasis on the mind, but we're talking about EQ and emotion, but they affect each other. No
exactly,
doubt.
the mind. And that's the beauty of having the avenue of neurology, because once you understand the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, and you begin to understand what triggers the emotion, and your ability to manage those emotions. The EQ, absolutely. The emotional quotient is really, really important, but you can't deal with your emotions until, in actual fact, you're in the right headspace to do it. And it is interrelated, but there is evidence to suggest, and I obviously also come from a personal position, that, and I must also correct, people tend to sort of think that meditation is mindfulness. We've got these two words, wellness and mindfulness. If you wouldn't mind if I could just sort of maybe position them as to how these words have become to have meaning today. Some people might say, no, it's more than that. But in industry today, wellness is where the horse is bolted. You're now actually dealing with, as part of your wellness program, the person who's already stressed, ill, requires more intervention than somebody who is on the resilience side of things. The mindfulness is a program that is looking as preventative. So wellness can be regarded as curative and mindfulness as preventative. But when you go into mindfulness programs, they vary because there are a lot of different definitions, although a broad definition is beginning to be generated by large world bodies. Mindfulness can vary from somebody just sitting down in the classic, what is regarded as the meditative position, shutting their eyes and sort of emptying their mind. That's one very small part of the full range of meditative skills. It wouldn't have been around for several thousand years and used by the army and the military and snipers and Olympic athletes, etc. If it just simply was a case of sitting down and, being mindful for a moment. There's a whole set of skills that come in the package that must be mastered. Of which one very small one is emptying the mind, and sitting down is one very small part of it, and not necessarily the business component of it. Yeah. So when we talk about resilience, it's a full set of skills that you have to learn.
Okay. I mean, it's your posture. There's so much to it.
Well, there's everything, there's respiration, relaxation, concentration, contemplation, dietary, and actualization, to mention just 6 of them. And each one of them have a neurological base and need to be understood in order to engage the autonomic nervous system. And it's like driving a car. It really is. Each of these are the pedal, the clutch, the gears, the steering wheel. And what you're doing is you're learning to drive your body and your mind like a car. Being in the right headspace means you've got to be in the right mind space, the emotional space, etc. So it reaches out to all of that. That's why for Meditation for Business, we have SMEs, we have a subject specialist who deliver, depending on what individuals or organizations need, we package it in order to build in the resilience which suits those particular professionals within that organization, or if they're coming to professionals in their own right. There's not one shoe that fits all. Somebody might have a very low EQ, and so building up their emotional resilience is really an important part once they're in the right headspace. To be able to evolve that and develop that is really important, etc., etc. So it's a multidisciplinary approach. But just coming back to you saying, how do we get the leaders? I mean, to change anything, we need the 4 criteria. We need to have a compelling reason, the self-discipline, support, and time. Surprisingly enough, money plays a very low part of it. So the compelling reason, I think that we've discussed it, and I think any good leader out there who has done, maybe listened to this, and done their own research, has the compelling reason, both the business and personal compelling reason. The next thing is the discipline. When somebody's already in a stressed position, that discipline, the balance between discipline and support is really dependent on the place that the company and the leaders are. If they are highly stressed, then the self-discipline tends to be lacking because of the last one, the time. They feel they don't have the time. Neurologically, we understand they do have the time. They spend most of the time, however, in their head. When we do a measure of how much output is achieved in a day, the actual output and the perceived output has a huge difference because of stress. The person is so stressed, they spend most of their time thinking and being stressed rather than doing. So in actual fact, part of the challenge is how we introduce the second part, which is support. Support is critical. That's where a lot of your leading organizations internationally and a large number locally recognize the need for support to maintain and sustain the resilience, because the default setting is fear. As soon as you stop, you go right back to the fear position. So you have to maintain that daily routine of building the muscles. One can sort of, the big joke of the universe on us, we better be calm, because if we're not, you're not going to gain any points for anything that you've done. You can have practiced, yes, your muscle, you probably wouldn't slide back overnight if you were a good practitioner and you'd built up that muscle, but you would ultimately go back. You would just have the tools to cope with that sliding back. But your amygdala is there day and night, just waiting to do a little fear analysis on incoming data. So building the tools to cope with that reaction of your fear center is what you're developing. But it's a balance. And as I said, in organizations, those that have built a support structure specifically for their leaders, because if the leaders are not on board, a company doesn't build a culture of resilience. Then we encourage professionals within that organization to come outside in their own capacity and come to us as professionals, irrespective of who they are. Because if they go in the company with resilience and they're dealing daily with leaders that are not in that resilience space, it doesn't build for a good culture within the organization, because you've got a calm set of people who are not part of the decision-making structure, and you've got leaders who are not. So there's this tension that exists. So we first insist, if we go into an organization, it must start with the leadership.
Sure, it must. Everything starts at the top. Barbara Parker, thank you. we're trying to keep these as short as possible, which is very difficult because there's so much value in what you're saying, and it's a whole topic in a world on its own. But I think you've put your thoughts out there, and we will have a conversation 2 and 3. I certainly look forward to it. It's something that I've looked into a little bit, and I have many more questions, but I'm going to hold them back for now. And we appreciate all your views. Barbara Parker, CEO of Meditation for Business, and it's part of the Hash Global Leadership Conversation 1 series. Thank you for your views. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for making us think. And we look forward to the future conversations, which, of course, we can have many around this important topic. Appreciate your time.
And thank you for the opportunity.